Geis or geas. Geis or geas was the foundational curse concept in Celtic mythology, a sacred magical obligation or prohibition that bound heroes and nobility throughout Irish, Welsh, and Scottish traditions, dating to the pre-Christian Celtic period. Unlike simple taboos, a geas acted as both blessing and curse, granting power while simultaneously creating vulnerability, and the more important or powerful the individual, the more geasa they typically carried upon them. These supernatural bonds could be positive obligations requiring specific actions or negative prohibitions forbidding certain behaviors, but breaking any geas brought catastrophic consequences, including death, loss of power, or complete dishonor that would destroy a hero's reputation forever. According to Irish mythology, geasa were often imposed by druids, supernatural beings, or through circumstances of birth, and they represented the binding power of oaths in Celtic society, where one's word held cosmic significance. The most dangerous situation occurred when a hero carried contradictory geasa that could not simultaneously be followed, creating an impossible trap where any action would break one obligation or another. Cuchulainn, Ulster's greatest champion, exemplified this burden with his famous geasa, including never refusing hospitality offered to him and never eating dog meat, prohibitions that his enemies would eventually weaponize against him. The plural forms vary by region and language, appearing as geasa in Irish texts, geasa in variant manuscripts, and geas in anglicized versions. While the violation of these sacred bonds typically led to gradual weakening before the final catastrophe struck the doomed individual, the Children of Lear. The Children of Lear stands as one of the three sorrows of Irish storytelling, a transformation curse from the mythological cycle composed around the 11th to 15th centuries CE, but based on older oral traditions of the Tuatha Dé Danann era. According to the tale, 4 children named Fiannuala, Eod, Fiachra, and Conn were transformed into swans by their jealous stepmother Eof, who envied the love their father Lear showed them after their mother Eob, Eowif's own sister, had died. The curse condemned them to spend 900 years as swans, divided into 3 periods of 300 years each at different locations throughout Ireland and the surrounding waters, including Lough Derravara in Westmeath, the Straits of Moyle between Ireland and Scotland, and the Isle of Inishglora. Despite their transformation, the children retained their human voices and consciousness, able to sing with such beauty that all who heard them felt peace and joy. Yet they endured terrible suffering, including the freezing winters on the stormy grey seas of Moyle. The curse could only be broken by the marriage of a northern prince to a southern princess and the sound of a Christian bell, conditions that finally came to pass with the arrival of Christianity in Ireland. When St. Comhaug baptized them and the curse lifted, the 4 swans transformed not back into children, but into withered ancient humans who had aged 900 years in moments. And they died almost immediately after their baptism, finally freed from their suffering. This tragedy represents the transition from Ireland's pagan past to its Christian future, Oisin's time curse. Oisin, the warrior poet and son of Fionn mac Cumhaill in the Fenian cycle, experienced one of Irish mythology's most tragic time displacement curses when he fell in love with Niamh Sin Oyer, whose name means Niamh of the Golden Hair. According to tales composed around the 12th to 13th century CE, this beautiful woman from the other world took Oisin across the sea on a white horse to Tir na Nog, the land of youth, where no one aged or died, and eternal beauty and happiness prevailed. Oisin was warned never to dismount or let his feet touch Irish soil, but after what seemed like only 3 years in paradise, he grew homesick, and returned to find that 300 years had actually passed in Ireland, demonstrating the dangerous time differential between the mortal world and the other world. When Oisin saw men struggling to move a large stone and leaned down from his horse to help them, his saddle girth broke and he fell, his feet touching the ground of Ireland for just a moment. The curse activated instantly, and 300 years of aging crushed down upon him in seconds, transforming the young warrior into a blind, withered ancient man whose body would crumble to dust within days. Irish tradition holds that he lived long enough to meet St. Patrick and share the old stories of the Fianna before his death, serving as a bridge between Ireland's pagan heroic age and its Christian present, though he could never return to the timeless paradise he had lost. Diarmuid's Bor Geis. Diarmuid Ua Dwybne, one of the greatest warriors of the Fianna in the Fenian cycle, carried a geas never to hunt boar because the animal was actually his half-brother transformed by magic, and prophecy declared he would die from a boar's wound in a curse that proved inescapable. According to the tale of Torrigach Diarmida Agus Graina, Diarmuid's father had killed his stepson, and the boy's druid father transformed the dead child into a magical boar that would hunt Diarmuid throughout his life, creating a supernatural cycle of vengeance. The boar of Ben Bulben, located at Ben Bulben Mountain in County Sligo, was unnaturally large, with venomous bristles, and possessed intelligence beyond normal animals, specifically seeking Diarmuid's death. When Fionn mac Cumhaill sought revenge against Diarmuid for eloping with Grain, Fionn's intended bride, he manipulated circumstances to force Diarmuid into hunting this very boar, effectively using the geas as a weapon. Despite Diarmuid's legendary combat skills, he was mortally wounded by the boar even as he killed it, and Fionn, who possessed healing power through water cupped in his hands, deliberately let the water slip through his fingers 3 times before Diarmuid died, choosing revenge over the bonds of brotherhood within the Fianna. Some manuscript versions describe Diarmuid being trampled by the boar's poison bristles after the creature's death, while others focus on the gore wound itself, but all agree that the combination of broken geas, prophecy, and Fionn's betrayal made this death unavoidable, representing how even the greatest heroes remain subject to fate and supernatural law. The Sons of Tuirian's Quest. The Sons of Tuirian represents one of the 3 sorrows of Irish storytelling from the mythological cycle, a punishment curse disguised as compensation that led 3 brothers to their deaths despite successfully completing impossible tasks. According to Oidhead Cloina Tuirian, the brothers Brian, Uchar, and Ucharba killed Cian, father of the god Lug Lamfada, and Lug imposed an eric or blood debt, consisting of 8 items that seemed simple but required deadly quests across the known world. The required items included 3 golden apples from the Garden of Hesperides, the healing pigskin of King Tuis, the poisoned spear of King Paisir, the chariot and horses of King Dobhar, 7 magical pigs of King Ezel, the hound whelp of the King of Iorweda, the cooking spit from the underwater fortress of Fionchwyl, and finally 3 shouts on the hill of Midkenna, each item guarded by powerful enemies who would fight to the death. The brothers traveled to Greece, Persia, and throughout the eastern lands, succeeding through combat skill and cunning in obtaining all 8 items, but the final task of giving 3 shouts on Midkenna's hill proved fatal when the guardian Midkenna and his sons mortally wounded all 3 brothers in battle. They returned to Ireland dying, carrying the very healing pigskin that could save them, but Lug coldly refused to lend them the magical skin they had retrieved for him, ensuring their deaths as the ultimate revenge for his father's murder. And their father Tuirian died of grief beside their bodies, completing this tragedy that brought magical treasures to the Tuatha De Danann at the cost of multiple lives. Balor's Evil Eye. Balor of the Evil Eye, king of the Fomorians, possessed the most famous death curse in Irish mythology, according to Cathmage Tuired, the tale of the second battle of Mag Tuired, where his poisoned eye could kill anything it gazed upon in a single glance. The origin of this terrible curse varies in different sources, but the most common version holds that Balor acquired his deadly eye as a child when he spied on his father's druids, and poisonous fumes from their mystical concoctions penetrated his eye, transforming it into a weapon of mass destruction. Balor's eyelid became so heavy from the curse that it required 4 servants, using a handle and lever system to lift it open. And once raised, everything within his gaze immediately withered and died, with no defense or protection possible against this supernatural power. The Fomorians, chaotic sea-dwelling beings representing primordial forces, used Balor's eye strategically in battle, positioning him carefully before unleashing devastation upon enemy armies with a single look. Despite this seemingly unstoppable power, prophecy declared that Balor would be killed by his own grandson, leading him to imprison his daughter Ethnew in a tower to prevent any children. But Ethnew bore Lug Lamfada, who would fulfill the prophecy. At the second battle of Mag Tuired, Lug killed Balor by slinging a stone through the evil eye into his brain, and according to some manuscript versions, the eye looked backward through Balor's skull as he died, turning its death gaze upon the Fomorian army behind him and destroying his own forces, marking the Tuatha De Danann's final victory over the Fomorians and establishing their supremacy over Ireland. Cuchulain's Triple Geas. Cuchulainn, Ulster's greatest champion in the Ulster cycle, carried multiple geasa that his enemies eventually weaponized to create an impossible trap leading directly to his death, as described in Éadad Chon Cillan and related texts. According to the tales, 3 of his most significant geasa included never refusing hospitality offered to him, never eating dog meat, and never refusing food from a woman, obligations that seem simple until they conflict with each other in deliberate manipulation. As Cu Chulainn rode toward his final battle, he encountered 3 old women at a hearth roasting dog meat who were actually enemies or agents of the Morrigan, disguised to ensnare him in contradiction. The women offered him food, creating an impossible situation where accepting would break his taboo against eating dog meat, particularly significant because his name literally means Hound of Culin. Making consumption of his namesake animal especially forbidden, yet refusing, would violate his geasa against denying hospitality and rejecting food from women. Forced to choose between equally catastrophic violations, Cu Chulainn accepted the food and ate with his left hand, and according to tradition, that arm immediately weakened, while his legendary strength and near invulnerability began draining away, leaving him vulnerable in the battle where he would meet his death. The Ulster cycle describes how he tied himself to a standing stone to die on his feet, facing his enemies rather than fall, and a raven representing the Morrigan landed on his shoulder to confirm his death, marking the end of Ulster's greatest defender, and demonstrating that even heroes who seemed unstoppable remained subject to the binding power of supernatural law and sacred obligation. The Morrigan's battle frenzy. The Morrigan, whose name appears in Irish mythology as a triple goddess of war, fate, and death, consisting of Bab, Macha, and Nemain in most traditions, could inflict devastating battle frenzy curses upon warriors and entire armies during combat. According to texts including Táin Bó Cúailnge and Cath Maige Tuired, the Morrigan possessed supernatural powers to create phantom armies and illusions, induce blind rage or paralyzing fear in warriors, and cause what sources call Bab's confusion, where soldiers could no longer distinguish friend from foe, turning to attack their own comrades in the chaos. The goddess frequently appeared as a crow or raven on battlefields, and her mere presence could shift the outcome of warfare through psychological and supernatural manipulation, rather than physical force alone. One of the most famous instances of her curse involved Cu Chulainn himself, after he rejected her romantic advances, leading her to attack him during single combat in 3 different animal forms, including an eel that tripped him, a wolf that stampeded cattle toward him, and a red heifer that led the stampede, each form designed to disadvantage him at critical moments. The Second Battle of Mag Tuired demonstrates the lethal power of her curse when her battle cry alone killed 100 warriors instantly without any physical contact whatsoever. Irish tradition also describes the Morrigan washing warrior's armor in fords before battles, an omen of death for those whose gear she cleaned, and her prophecies of doom spoken before combat invariably came true, representing the uncontrollable and supernatural aspects of warfare and Celtic belief, where divine displeasure could doom entire armies regardless of martial skill or strategic planning. Macha's Curse. Macha's Curse represents one of the most significant collective curses in Irish mythology, affecting all of Ulster for 9 generations according to the Ulster cycle tale Noindan Ulad, and playing a central role in Táin Bó Cúailnge. According to tradition, a woman named Macha, who was actually a goddess in disguise, lived as the wife of a man named Cruniach, who foolishly boasted at the king's assembly that his pregnant wife could run faster than the king's horses. King Conchobar MacNessa demanded she prove this claim by racing despite her being heavily pregnant and about to give birth, and when Macha begged the crowd to wait until she delivered her child, they mocked her pleas, and the king forced the race to proceed. Macha ran and won the race against the royal horses, but immediately upon crossing the finish line, she collapsed in labor, gave birth to twins, which explains the name Amain Macha, meaning the twins of Macha, and died cursing all of Ulster with her final breaths. The curse decreed that for 9 generations, whenever Ulster faced its time of greatest need, all men of Ulster would suffer the pains of childbirth for 5 days and 4 nights, leaving them as weak and helpless as newborn babies unable to defend their kingdom. Only Cu Chulainn remained immune to this curse because he was not originally from Ulster, which explains why during the cattle raid of Cooley, when Queen Medb of Connaught invaded, the entire Ulster army lay incapacitated, while Cu Chulainn alone defended the entire kingdom against the invading forces, demonstrating divine retribution for collective cruelty and the disrespect shown to a woman's desperate plea for mercy. Carman and her son's blight. Carman and her 3 sons represent the most environmentally devastating curse in Irish mythology, according to the metrical Dinshensha's. Ancient lore of places where this foreign sorceress and her destructive offspring used magic to blight Ireland's crops and devastate the land itself. Tradition holds that Carman came from Athens, though this may be symbolic for any foreign origin, accompanied by her 3 sons, whose names were Dub meaning black, Duther meaning evil, and Dian meaning violence, names that reflected their destructive nature. The family arrived in Ireland intending to conquer through starvation rather than warfare, using sorcery to turn green fields black, wither crops before harvest, kill livestock, and render the soil barren for years, attacking the agricultural foundation upon which all Irish society depended. When Tuatha Dé Danann warriors discovered that conventional weapons could not defeat this magical assault, they called upon 3 specialists in supernatural combat, the poet Ai, the satirist Creedon Bell, and a figure named Lug, who was distinct from the god Lug Lamfada, and these 3 used counter magic, satire, and poetic spells to defeat Carman's sons. The sons were banished from Ireland with prohibitions never to return, while Carman herself either died of grief at their defeat or was imprisoned by the Tuatha Dé Danann, depending on which version of the tale one follows. To prevent the curse from ever returning, the Irish established the Festival of Carman held at Lugnasad on the plain of Carman in what is now County Kildare, celebrating agricultural prosperity and the victory of Irish magic over foreign sorcery that had threatened to destroy the land itself through supernatural blight. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.